It is a pleasure to be here. I've never been to Portugal before, other than being laid over at the airport on my way to Geneva. So I actually got to touch the beach. It's lovely. As a Californian, vaguely reminiscent, but a whole other world at the same time. Oh, gosh. What the fuck is going on in the world today? What is Brazil, my country, everywhere? It is nuts. We seem to have decided that the world is fundamentally defined by us versus them. And maybe that's not terribly surprising. One of my favorite papers of the last couple of years, they're all my favorite, by the way, when I cite them, but let's just pretend. So it found that when male sports fans watch their favorite team win, their testosterone spikes just as much as the actual winning players. So I imagine a couple of years ago when Portugal won the European Championships, many of you in this room felt like you won. You were right there out on the pitch, putting in the goal. It wasn't any of these ridiculous male models pretending to be athletes. It was you. And it's easy in a world like that, where your biology makes us versus them so easy to buy into, to participate in this incredible fuck-up of a political experience we're engaged in right now. But I'm going to start off by talking about some projects I've worked on. And then we're going to come back to the idea of human potential. And the reason I'm going to start off with some projects is because I do some interesting work, and it's fun to talk about it. But also, I hope it conveys something a little more grounded in terms of how to actually engage with the world. So one of my staff made this thing for me. This is a picture. I gave a talk once, and some very nice artist made paintings of all of the speakers, and so this was the painting. And if you had a choice between that and having to look at this, I figured that was nicer. And then these were supposed to be all the different me's that were involved, brains and science. The purple one is funny. We were trying to find an icon that represented entrepreneurship, and that seemed to be the only one that we could find. It's the fish swimming the other way is supposed to be the entrepreneur. In my experience, the most entrepreneurs are unrepentant schoolers. They swim right along with everyone else. Maybe some of the best of them are the sharks that figure out where everyone else is swimming and get a good lunch. But let's pretend like that's entrepreneurship. It certainly could be. And in its ideal, that's what it is. Let's do something different, something distinctly different. In fact, let's dispense with the idea that there's a market for it. Is it possible to do something that makes the world better? And for that, in and of itself, to be its own reward? So this little kid right here was identified by a world-renowned scientific panel to be the cutest little boy in the entire world. The fact that the panel was made up by myself and his other mom is completely beside the point. We're scientists, which means we're completely objective in all things. It was 7 years ago. A Sunday evening leading up to the US Thanksgiving holiday when he threw up in the bath. I'd been feeling a little unwell, just seemed like the flu. By that Wednesday, he'd lost 25% of his body mass and couldn't stand up. We'd been tracking, we'd been in contact with the doctors the whole time. We rushed into the hospital, and they don't even actually need to run a test. You could smell it. His sweat was sweet. It was all the sugar that had built up in his bloodstream. He had type 1 diabetes, as just alluded to. I bet you know where this story is going. So took us completely by surprise. No family history of type 1 diabetes, but boy, his blood sugars were off the chart. If you're not familiar with it, it's an autoimmune disease. Your own immune system destroys the cells that make insulin. Without insulin, you can eat whatever you want. The sugar just builds up in your bloodstream. You can sweat it out, you can pee it out, but it can't get inside the cells. You literally starve to death. Your body eats itself, trying to stay alive. So we spent a very hard and long 4-day weekend at the Oakland Children's Hospital. And it was no fun, believe me, believe me. Although it gives you a lot of perspective. We left as a whole family. And that was not true of all the families that were there. They were going to leave someone behind. And seeing all the other kids, the kids that were there chronically, kids going to school at the hospital, I mean, it's heartbreaking. But in the moment, this was my son. And we came through it. And about a month later, well, forget a month later, like that night, so we get home Sunday night, and he has his first meal outside of the hospital. And you can see we started a spreadsheet, and it says mashed potatoes, 169 grams. Goose, 89 grams. This was his Thanksgiving meal. Any of you familiar with American holiday? Everything recorded. We started from that moment, everything he ate, to the gram, recorded. And in fact, then I went through and got the nutrition information out of all of these websites online, the protein, the fat, the carbohydrate load. We recorded his heart rate, his blood glucose levels, his activities. Did he have the sniffles? Was he grumpy that morning? We crashed Google Docs again and again and again. This was, I mean, my wife and I were both scientists. This was us trying to deal with this problem. We wanted data so that we could give it to his doctor and they could help. So about a month afterwards, we go in for our first outpatient visit. And before we went in, I emailed all of that data to my doctor, his doctor, who I really like, still is doctor today. And they don't respond. I'm like, what? Well, that's strange. I mean, we so kindly just gave them 15,000 numbers, and they have no comment on it. And I thought for a minute, and I realized they want a printout. So we printed about an inch thick of spreadsheet to bring in with us to the doctor. And we show up, I'm so proud of myself, and we're giving this to them, and they were angry, especially the nurses. How dare you waste our time? What are we supposed to do with this data? By the way, in the second half of this talk, I don't have a lot of time left, so let's just say we're all going to sit here for the next 5 hours. Later in this talk, later this week, we're going to talk a little bit about the future of work. And let me preview that a little bit. If someone ever says, what am I supposed to do with this data? Their job is not long for this world. But that was their reaction. And of course, it's not that surprising. You all saw where this was going. Doctors aren't trained to deal with data, not in that way. 15,000, I mean, your brain can't even process that. Were they going to just flip through page after page of spreadsheet? So they gave us a sheet of paper. We hand wrote 15 numbers, 5 days, morning, evening, afternoon. 15 blood glucose levels, arbitrarily taken out of a month of ubiquitous data. And then the doctor squinted at it for a couple of minutes and said, okay, here's what we're going to do. And they set the treatment plan for the next few months. And I thought, you have got to be fucking kidding me. I make models of the brain. Are you telling me diabetes is more complex than the brain? Forgive my foul mouth. I'm an American. Let's just leave it at that. So I'm also illiterate. I don't happen to own a gun, but that's not always been true. So that night, I bought a book on endocrinology and read it, and then the next day, we started building a system called Jitterbug. So we hacked all of his medical devices, his insulin pump, continuous glucose monitor. Got him a smartwatch. This was before the iWatch and everything, but they were still versions back then. So we were getting heart rate, activity levels, sweat response. We have all this data. And I've hacked all these devices. Turns out I broke several federal US laws, and later got to talk to that guy about it. I sent it all to my personal server. And then I took a model. Turns out, you may not know this, but your eyes, your ears, your senses are constantly predicting the future. Just in a basic information theoretic way. It's the cheapest way of encoding the world. Predict the future, just encode the errors. So I took that model, fiddled with it a little bit, and built a system that can predict hours into the future whether or not your blood sugar levels will go high or low. Now, the funny thing about this project is no one had ever built an AI for diabetes before. It's crazy. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. People die from it every year. And yet, no one had ever thought. And it's easy to understand why if you understand that if you're an endocrinologist, you understand the biophysics of insulin production and digestion perfectly. There's nothing to be predicted. Everything is totally known. And the thing that can't be predicted can't be predicted. It's noise. It's just complicated. So I built an AI, and we were able to make these predictions because it turns out when you look at a little time-varying stream of blood glucose data coming out of a little boy, it's not about insulin production, and it's not about digestion. This is the story of a little boy's life. How he woke up grumpy one morning and went and ate a little bit of food before he got his insulin dose. And then he was high through the rest of the morning and had to delay his lunch. And then he was tired and went low in the afternoon, and it echoes throughout his day. This is someone's life. This isn't biophysics. Yeah, there's biophysics that's a part of it. But it's one of the things I tell my graduate students and my employees very on in doing the kind of work that we do. Forget what the data says it is. It's always something much richer than that. There's always a story. There's always a life behind all of this. We were able to build something that changed the life of my son. And then we gave it away. So some of these things are just about to hit the market. Others are still being developed. But one of my favorites, Eli Lilly, is building what's called a closed-loop insulin pump, kind of like a thermostat. No human has to directly control it. And they work pretty well. But now they're building one that has these predictive models into it. In fact, they extended it to a deep neural network. And at least in simulation, it works better than the real thing, which is actually a little eerie. And later this afternoon, I'll have a little conversation here about the ethics of a lot of the kind of work that I do. But in the moment, someone's life is saved. And the funny thing to me is I give this little talk every now and then, sometimes a little longer, sometimes a little more briefly, and inevitably someone comes up to me afterwards, morally affronted that we gave it away. And by gave it away, I mean I didn't patent anything. I didn't license it to anyone. I got on the phone with engineers at all the big companies and all the NGOs working in the space, and I told them exactly what I did. And then I ran around to a bunch of parent groups, and I told them exactly what I did. And let the market do its fact. No one can sit on a patent. No one has to wait for the lawyers to negotiate anything. It's direct competition, because the insulin pump that's second to market with the AI to keep your child alive loses. And so everyone has to work on it immediately, right away. And if you're one of those people that feels morally affronted that I gave something away that was worth a lot of money, just imagine I took the money and I bought the lives that would have been lost waiting for the negotiations to go through. And that's how I look at it. Oh, thank you. If I had my choice, my theme music is a Stevie Wonder song. I'm sure you all know Stevie Wonder, but you may not know this particular song, You Haven't Done Nothing. A very good representative line out of that is, we're sick and tired of hearing the song, how you're going to change right from wrong. If you really want to hear our views, you haven't done nothing. It's very useful for someone like me to have that play through my head all the time. I believe in the work that I do, but I never want to, I'm always uncomfortable with the applause, but thank you nonetheless. So we built this thing for my son, and we gave it away. And I had the chance to do this over and over again. I had a startup I was on the board of in New York, and they were building a system to track people's emotions. And I said, listen, I'll join your board. I'll help build your company. In exchange, give me all of your data. We're going to build a system to predict manic episodes in bipolar sufferers. And it turns out we could do it. It turns out pretty easily. Again, why hadn't anyone done this before? We didn't ask questions. We didn't have to track people's conversations or their texts. Just the passive data from a mobile phone, we could see 3 to 4 weeks ahead of what we call the subjective onset of a manic episode. 25% of severe sufferers will go on to kill themselves. Most people go through job loss and divorce. And now here's a chance to approach this disease completely differently than just throwing a bunch of drugs at it. So again, we gave it away. In fact, that startup eventually went out of business. I've had, as it turns out, I've either been a founder or a founding executive at about 7 startups right now, if you throw in the sort of the entrepreneurial NGOs. And you know, that's the reality. One of my own companies didn't really go anywhere. And many of the startups you advise, most of them aren't going to become what they envisioned they would be. But I don't measure it that way. I measure it by whether you made a difference in the world, whether someone's life is better because you existed. And in that case, even though the startup went out of business, the system we made to predict manic episodes still exists out in the world and has the chance to save lives every day. And I'm immensely proud of that. I actually got invited, as you can see, to the White House. It's been a couple of years. I think my most recent invitations must have been lost in the mail. I'm not certain. But I got invited to this very fancy party, and I showed up wearing Google Glass. So at the time, if you don't recall, Google Glass was this wearable computer on your head. So mine, by the way, were fluorescent blue. It has a live camera, it has voice activation, and I was wearing it like continuously for 3 years. And trust me, it isn't that fun. When you walk down the street and people say, glass hole, as you walk past, it doesn't feel great. And they gave me an early release pair because they were trying to come up with ideas of things to do with it. It's a genuinely interesting idea. I'm a big believer in augmented reality as an interface for the world. I happen to be interested in neuroprosthetics. So when I say augmented reality, I actually want to build this directly into your brain. We can get back to that later. You've all volunteered. So in this particular case, we were trying to come up with these clever ideas. And so I was wearing these because I built myself a superpower. One of the things that we had this do is that's where I got my updates. I was in Washington, D.C. My son was back in San Francisco. I was literally at the White House, behind secret security clearance, and I got an update. Felix's blood sugar levels will go low in 30 minutes. And I was able to send a text message to my sister, who was taking care of him, and said, give him some crackers. And he didn't go low. But that wasn't the only thing. By the way, it was funny, because I show up at this party wearing a fluorescent blue life computer on my face, and the president and the vice president were at the party. Turns out the Secret Service were not thrilled about this. So I show up, and I swear to God that I asked permission ahead of time, that maybe they didn't know what they were saying yes to. So my wife and I, we get in, we beeline straight for the hors d'oeuvres. So the White House throws a really good party, and we figure, why should it end when we leave? So we're stuffing all these hors d'oeuvres in our purses to take home with us. And this enormous guy with the like curly Q thing coming out of his ear walks up to us. And I thought, oh shit, we're busted. Stealing food from the White House. And he walks up and he says, is that Google Glass? And I said, yes. And it does pictures, yes. It does video. And now I'm thinking, what does he want me to hook him up? Is this like a shakedown? And then he says, please don't live stream the president. That was it, just please. I'm about to fly home and go back through US passport control. Oh God, I wish it worked that easily there. So I said, sure, yeah. And it turns out, I didn't know this at the time, but the Secret Service took about 5 minutes bothering, at the time, the most powerful man in the world. Clearly, we've done our best to make certain that's not true anymore. But wasting his time trying to figure out whether to kick me out of the White House or not. And in the end, he says, no. It would have been great for Google if I'd been kicked out for wearing it. But turns out this is the first and only presidential portrait ever taken with Google Glass. May not believe it or not, but I wasn't trying to take a picture of Lord Nelson there. I really would have wanted a much better picture of the president. This might be a testament to the success of Google Glass as a product. But it was actually a blast. He pops out of this little secret door. The Secret Service pushed everyone else away. It was just my wife and I. And he walks straight out, and he looks at me and just shakes his head. It's just like, Jesus, lady, really, take the stupid thing off your head. So I thought I'd really impress him. And I said, OK, Google, take a picture. So I snapped that photo of him. He was not impressed. But then I got to say that the reason I was wearing them is that I'd hacked all of my son's medical devices and built an AI to treat him, and I was just getting messages. And he was impressed by that. And then I got to tell him that another project we'd developed for Google Glass was a system that could read facial expressions. So the very first machine learning project I ever worked on, long ago as an undergrad, was doing real-time lie detection for the CIA off of raw video. Now, understandably, when I travel internationally, for that matter, even in the States, not everyone is thrilled with the idea of the CIA doing lie detection off of raw video, but as an undergrad doing an academic project, it was incredibly cool to be able to build this stuff that could actually learn all on its own, learn about faces, learn about emotions. And you're actually seeing a real-time version of that right now. One of the former PIs of that project is sort of demoing it live there. I'll come back to that in a moment. I don't know. Genuinely, we might need to push this out a few hours. So I took what I'd learned to do, and I built it into Google Glass. Now, you could imagine all sorts of things one might do with such a technology, not the least of which is lie detection. Turns out that's a little challenging, but it could be done. Clearly, face recognition. So I could pull up your LinkedIn accounts or your Facebook accounts, get data about you. I could maybe float your credit scores over everyone's head. Imagine all of your bank employees looking at every new person that walks in the door, and you see their credit score the moment they walk in. I could pull up your Grindr account if that's you, or Ashley Madison if you're a CFO. I could do all sorts of terrible things. If you don't know what Ashley Madison is, ask your husband. So none of which is wonderful, I will fully admit. But that's not why we did it. I did it for autistic kids. Turns out one of the most common symptoms of autism spectrum disorder is an inability to read facial expressions. They can learn it like a second language, but they don't get it for free the way the rest of us do. I'm maybe borderline. But it turns out they can learn, and the state of the art today is still cartoon faces on flashcards. Now, whether you're doing it on a computer or not, that is pretty poor as a way of learning how to read facial expressions. So I thought, what if you could wear these glasses And in real time, with an actual interaction with another person, you could see that they're happy and they're sad. So if you can't learn it at all, it's still a prosthetic. It could still serve to let you know, oh, geez, this person is really bored with you. I could use that. But it turns out not only does it work as a prosthetic, but our brains process social information fundamentally differently than other kinds of information. And in fact, when these kids learn how to read facial expressions in social interactions, it works even better. But here's the thing we didn't expect, the third benefit. Another common symptom of autism is a lack of empathy. I'm not saying people are mean or evil or psychopathic, just they have a very hard time understanding other people's motivations. Well, maybe that's not that surprising. If you learned people's emotions from cartoon faces, what do they lack? They lack a story. Why is that cartoon face happy? Why is it sad? Why is it disgusted? It's not. It just is. Turns out when these kids learn to read facial expressions and actual interactions, they learn empathy as well. You have the chance to genuinely change someone's life, whether it's diabetes or bipolar disorder or autism. Going in and building a simple little tool. Every one of these was just me. Just me by myself hacking away. And I'm not that clever that this is very special. Anybody could do this. By the way, a little side story. So that lab, my undergraduate lab, spun off as a startup. Struggled along for a little while because, frankly, expression recognition as a product is a bit vague. This is a very big deal in the AI space right now. All of my companies have had something to do with artificial intelligence. But as I'm going to say later, so I'll bust my own slide, AI is just a tool. It won't solve your problems for you. And in that sense, if you're an entrepreneur working in the AI space, an AI startup, what is that even supposed to mean? What are you selling? Who buys AI? Does it fuel my car? Like, solve an actual problem. If you solve a problem, one, it doesn't matter that much what your tool is, but if you have a truly unique tool, you will have an infinite number of opportunities to continue to solve other problems using it. But that's a personal aside. So they struggled for a little while. Deep neural networks then came into vogue. They applied them to this process. Their performance jumps. Again, you see it running in real time. And they have this very clever idea. Gosh, what was it? About 2.5 years ago now, they ran a real-time video. So you could watch one of the early US Republican primary debates when there was 87 of them on the stage. And half of them, you're wondering, do they actually have human emotions? So they ran this thing, and you could just log in, I think YouTube or something, and watch it go in real time. And very literally, the next day, the bidding war started between Facebook and Apple. Just that little demonstration. So Apple won. And if you have an iPhone 10, all of that face recognition technology, that's my old undergraduate lab. Reading your faces, reading your expressions. There's the animojis. I don't know if any of you have ever had the truly terrible taste to actually use one of these, but we talked about it 20 years ago. Boy, it would be so cool. You could get on your phone. You know, this was not smartphone stuff. You could get on your phone, and instead of sending a high bandwidth video, we could just grab the face coordinates and transmit them, and then we could animate whomever, Richard Nixon, Ronaldo, a cat on the other end, and it's you. The only reason I'm sharing this story is this hard-won lesson, which is all innovation, right? This is Singularity University. We're talking about the disruptive power of innovation. What I have learned from 20 years of doing cutting-edge artificial intelligence research is that in the end, all innovation, like this one, $20 million of CIA funding, dozens of dissertations, 20 years of research. In the end, it animates cats. That's all innovation does. I don't care where you're working in quantum mechanics. You could be innovating in blockchain. I guarantee you, just wait till the cats take over blockchain, and we're all fucked. These are just a few stories. But I work in all sorts of spaces. So it turns out when we think about human potential, we're not just thinking about health or mental health. We're thinking about education and workforce. We're thinking about inclusion. In fact, thinking about innovation itself. This is the coolest thing. I have the best job in the entire world. I am a professional mad scientist. And it is amazing. A couple of years ago, I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do next? I founded a bunch of companies. It's great. Some of them even been successful. What do I do? Am I going to write books? Am I going to run for office? Actually, at the White House once, someone said, "Are you thinking of running for office?" And I said, well, I mean, who's more likely to get elected than a mother of two transgendered theoretical neuroscientist that wants to control your children's minds? And the guy slapped his head and said, "Oh, Jesus, you could have just said scientist, and it would have been bad enough." Oh, I love America. So, but we founded a think tank. And we simply go around the world, and we help solve problems for free. My life has been good to me, and this is how I've decided to spend the remainder of it. And it is an amazing privilege, because every time I do something stupid, like give a technology away, or turn down a chief scientist job at some giant company, my life gets better, and better every time. All right, so we have 14 minutes left for the next 3 hours of talk. This might go a little fast. So I already mentioned this already, that AI isn't going to solve your problems for you. But let's generalize this. Technology isn't a magic solution to anything. It is an incredibly powerful tool. Artificial intelligence, overhyped as it has been, is still an immensely powerful tool. Your toaster oven is never going to wake up and prefer Manchester United over AC Milan. This just is not going to happen. But already what we've invented today is truly going to change the nature of our lives. In the end, though, there's only messy human problems. And they only ever have messy human solutions. If you don't know the solution to your problem, technology isn't going to figure it out for you. We can get a little wonky about it. What technology does is it changes the economics. A solution that may never have been scalable before, that you may never have been able to share with the world, now you can often give it away nearly for free. It is certainly something that makes my life much easier. Think about the things I've already talked about. I built an AI to monitor my son's diabetes. That used to require a very highly compensated endocrinologist to do. I built a system to help predict manic episodes. Again, you can pay a doctor, psychiatrist, psychologist to help you work through these things. You may not think of it as a very common job, but wasn't my very first project meant to put out of work all the CIA spies that were trying to read real-time video to tell if people were lying? Imagine you could just apply this in real time to all the video in the world. Yes, some of the algorithms I was involved in building 20 years ago are now being used in China in ways that I do not agree with, and that is a challenging thing to deal with. But ultimately, you make a difference in the world because you actually understand the problem, and then you bring the right tools to bear. All right, let's see how much of this we can do. So this one I'm just going to have to throw out there. I said I gave a talk before. It turns out it was a TED Talk. And it was originally titled The Fanatic. Apparently that's far too scary a title, so they retitled it The Very Poetic, The Paradox of Incentive Insensitivity. And rather than, it's lovely. It's nice to feel the place is getting built around you. So rather than give that talk here now in the moment, go check it out. I'll simply give you the punchline, which was I was the chief scientist in one of the very first companies to use AI for hiring. Now, I say this very genuinely, but with great nuance that I won't be able to share in the moment, do not use AI for hiring. The chance that you will do it wrong is so phenomenally great. Because I can tell you right now what will happen. You take a deep neural network and you throw it at a ton of hiring history data, it will tell you to hire straight white men from wealthy conservative backgrounds. That's actually published research. Now, I hope everyone understands that while such people are not bad employees, that is not the causal model that makes for great work. So instead, I took 3 months and I read every research paper I could find about what makes a great employee. And then we built little AIs to crawl out on the internet and look for those qualities. We built a database of 122 million people looking for the things that predict the best. Turns out it's not your university. Not once I know other deeper things about you. It's not your name. It's not the skills that you know. Again, those are just tools. They're all just tools. The thing that predicts you isn't the tools, it's the craftsman. You want to hire people, hire craftsmen. So this talk was about one interesting discovery. The best salespeople in the world were the ones that cared the least about the incentives. This was one of those things that we discovered. We call it endogenous motivation, that drive that comes from within. The people that care the most about the bonuses, about getting fired, they want to impress their parents, they're afraid of the scorn of their peers. Turns out that saps long-term productivity. Not just that, you live shorter lives, less happy. Everything about a good life comes from inside you. Doesn't mean you don't listen to other people. But this is a powerful lesson. Go check out the talk if you're interested in the details. But here's what we discovered. That was just one factor out of many. Right now in my work, we do this both with very little children, all the way up through senior citizens. We have identified a series of about 50 factors. It's not meant to be a theory of intelligence or anything like that. It's just a whole bunch of things that are measurable. I'm a hard number scientist. They are predictive of long-term life outcomes, lifetime wealth, lifetime income, education attainment, walking speed at age 65, social connectivity, subjective well-being, psychologists talk for happiness, 7 different biomarkers of health outcomes, including things like central body mass and insulin sensitivity. No one's great at all of these. Nobody. Everybody has weaknesses. And no one of these constructs is uniquely predictive. Working memory span is an area where I actually do neuroprosthetics research. I have a little company right now, and you flip a switch, and you literally get smarter. That's another story. Again, you may not realize it, but you all volunteered for those experiments. But it turns out, while it is, as a population level, highly predictive of how long you'll live and how far you go in your education, at an individual level, it doesn't tell that rich of a story. There are plenty of people driving taxi cabs with enormous working memory spans. But it turns out, when you look at them all together, what we see is not a unique pattern, but a big distributed pattern, a rich set of strengths. And one other important ingredient: compensatory strategies for your weaknesses. No one's good at everything. And the difference between the asshole genius no one wants to work with, or that amazing social operator that never seems to quite have the oomph to get it together, is, and the successful people figure themselves out and deal with it. I'm not great socially. I have the social skills of an autistic badger. And so I hire people that are good at it, so I don't have to be. And I do other little things. I've become very comfortable walking around on a stage. Being a professional pompous jackass is a nice substitute for actually having social skills. Everyone's always amazed when I say that, because it seems like I have them when I talk on stage, but I don't. You're all naked. I'm using all of the techniques people use to imagine and get through a talk. That's not how I operate. So I came up with my own compensatory strategies. So this is it. If you want to hire a craftsman, that's what you hire for. And I realize the challenge is, when you hire from some elite university, you're hoping it's a proxy for this. And it is. Elite universities tend to be made up of people that are rich in meta-learning skills. By the way, term meta-learning is learning to learn. The people that are able to learn are the ones that do the best. So, but it turns out it's a poor proxy, not for the people that have it, but for the people that don't. One of the things we found at my company that did AI for hiring, with that giant mass of people to study, is that for every highly credentialed person that was truly great at their job, there were 10 to 100 times as many people that were equally qualified but didn't have those credentials. Now that is a distorted market. But it actually goes even deeper than that. So in my remaining 5 minutes, I will try to convey a big idea. There have been a lot of big policy reports about the future of work. The UN had one, the World Bank, the US, the UK. Although I haven't read it, I'm willing to bet Portugal has had one come out, or a university here. Everybody has a report on the future of work. All the big consultancy companies, McKinsey's had a long series of them, and they're all wrong. Now, I realize how ridiculous it is for one crazy lady to say all of these incredibly important and responsible people are all wrong about the future of work. But I offer as one symptom of a problem the fact that not a single one of these reports talks about people. They talk about jobs, they talk about skills. The number one recommendation, everyone needs to continually reskill throughout their whole life. The number one concrete recommendation, everyone needs to learn how to program. That is bullshit. If in 10 years the vast majority of code is not written by AIs, I will be shocked. Shocked because I can imagine it happening? No, because I've seen it. I have friends that build AIs that build AIs. If you are doing the same job this week that you were doing last week, even if you got a very fancy degree to do it, you're doing risk analysis on spreadsheets. You're reading x-rays, looking for abnormal growths. You're reading contracts, looking for loopholes. You're writing code. To me, you're even more desirable a target than if you were a taxi driver or a farm worker or doing package delivery. Everyone keeps talking about how low-skilled workers will be put out of jobs by robots. Robots are expensive. And that's hard to do. It's hard to pick a strawberry. You may not think so, but it is if you're a robot. Whereas this stuff, doing a risk analysis on a spreadsheet, oh, that's a sweet spot for artificial intelligence. It's economically valuable. Lots of people do it all around the world. An enormous amount of data exists. As long as it isn't changing dramatically, all of that will go away because I can build an AI, or some jerk like me can do it virtually for free. And now a high-value task, not a job. No one's really paying people tons of money just to do risk analysis. It's what I do with the risk analysis is actually valuable. But 80% of the hours of those highly paid professionals is doing busy work. Cognitively complex, rote busy work. And it's all going to disappear. The professional middle class is about to get blindsided. And everyone promised them that if they went to university, they have a job for their whole life. The simple truth is, the only thing I need you useless bags of organic material for is to explore the unknown. It's the only thing I can't build an AI to do. And I'm not saying no one will ever be able to, but we will have to invent entirely new classes of technology to do that. No one is on the verge of a truly intelligent AI. But if you spend most of your time just cranking it out, I don't need you. When I bring grad students into my lab, I don't care whether they know neuroscience or how to program. Complex math is hard to pick up later in your life, but I did it. I care about only one thing of any real value. Will they come up with an idea that I didn't? That's it. Same thing with the people coming into my think tanks and into my companies. Oh, we can skip this. Well, one more, maybe even beyond that. There you go. There will only be one job description in the future. Creative, adaptive, not just problem solver. It's not good enough for me to say, here's an interesting problem, go solve it. Creative, adaptive problem explorer. I think there might be something interesting over there. Go find it, figure it out, let me know if you need my help. That is it. That's what we're looking for. Yes, people might do it in more technical fields. They might do it a little more journalistically. The fact is, all those meta-learning qualities, once you control for them, it doesn't matter whether you got a degree in journalism or engineering. People's economic outcomes are largely the same. In fact, it doesn't matter whether you go to university or not. People's economic outcomes are largely the same. Those are the qualities that actually matter. And I know when people talk about massive displacement of jobs, about getting blindsided, about me not needing you useless bags of organic material, it sounds very fearsome. But I want to take this moment to say that there's a much more positive side to this. It's not a trivial one to reach, but it's a real one, which is the thing that makes each of us valuable. I'm not going to sneeze. The thing that makes each of us valuable is what makes each of us unique. And it's been very easy for that to be a line, a pat on the back for your kid, for your students, feel good about themselves. But now it's a reality. Your marginal value to the economy, but also your ability to change a life, is the very thing that makes you unique. And what that requires of you is the courage to be that person. The courage to do what you truly think is right. To leave your job if you think you can do more some other way. I didn't really give you a definition for human potential, and pretty soon this thing is just going to be flashing red at me and then cursing, and then a clown will come and brush me off the stage. But we ran a workshop recently in LA trying to come up with a definition, an actual Wikipedia entry for human potential. And we ended up using the metaphor from physics. It's like potential energy versus kinetic energy. The kind of work that I do could be very scary, especially the invasive neuroprosthetic stuff, because it could sound like I want to decide for other people who they should be, what skills they should have, what job they should do, where they should live. No, that's the kinetic energy. I want to put the potential energy into people's lives so that they can be whoever they want to be. My job isn't to decide what your purpose should be. It should be to help you believe in your strength of purpose. I happen to use artificial intelligence to help people do that, but that's not the point. The point is what you do with it. It's the choice that you make. And one of the most important qualities fundamentally, for me, of the very idea of human potential is that there is no us versus them. That is completely contrary to the core of this idea. It's just us. Our lives get better when other people have better lives. And I know in a real world, not everyone here is going to go out and quit their job and do philanthropic work, but I'm not asking you to. My life has been very good, despite the fact that I continually do all of these insane things. So the only thing I'm actually asking you to do is tonight, don't wait. Before you even come back in here tomorrow morning or out into the world, go do something amazing. I know it feels like you can't. I know it feels like it's impossible to make a big impact on the world. Oh, Vievienne uses artificial intelligence, and we don't have that. None of that matters. Messy human problems, messy human solutions. You know something about the world that no one else in the world knows. You, as an individual, have the chance to make other people's lives better. Please go out and plant a tree. Thank you so much.